Well, good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We are going to continue with our review and study of the administrative agency debacle in the United States of America. In light of the fact that we lost so much time on it yesterday and there is so much information to go over under the Administrative Procedures Act, I'm going to skip my normal bullet points this morning and delve right into this. The only preface I want to make to that is that I received in an email yesterday from Senator Claire McCaskill a note dated February 18th in which she indicates that she is thanking me for contacting her regarding the Sportsman's Act. Now, if you recall, we were fighting about this back around Christmas time. And she says, I appreciate hearing from you and welcome the opportunity to respond. As a lifelong Missourian, the daughter of a sportsman and member of a bipartisan Congressional Sportsman Caucus, I know how important recreational fishing and hunting is to the culture and the economy of our state. That is why I co-sponsored Sportsman's Act S3525 and voted on September 22 to advance this important legislation. Introduced by Tester of Montana, this bipartisan legislation combined nearly 20 different measures aimed at preserving hunting and fishing rights and opening up more public lands to outdoor recreation. Currently, upwards of 35 million acres of existing public land cannot be accessed or have restricted access for sportsmen. The Sportsman's Act would have addressed this obstacle by requiring that the portion of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, the primary source of federal money for acquiring recreation land, be used to purchase land that would improve access to existing public lands where access is now restricted. In addition, this legislation would have reauthorized a number of important conservation programs, such as the North American Wetlands Conservation Act and the Partners for Fish and Wildlife Program. This bill also included two specific measures I've strongly supported in the past, one to permanently prevent the EPA from regulating hunting ammo and fishing tackle, and another to aid the development of new shooting ranges on public land. In spite of its positive provisions and its backing from sportsman groups like Ducks Unlimited and conservation groups like the National Wildlife Federation, the Sportsman's Act failed to pass before the Congress ended on January 2nd, 2013. I am disappointed by this setback, but I will continue working to pass legislation supporting hunting and conservation efforts during the 113th Congress. Thank you for contacting. Don't hesitate. I'm sorry, Ms. McCaskill. You, like all federal representatives and courts, I might add, appear to have completely ignored the basic demand in the request, was that in order for you to pass this, you would have shunted into it a little-known regulation that would have allowed the administrative agencies that we'll be talking about today to basically walk in and take land from private owners based on their desire to have a puddle's worth of water protected for some noxious amoeba or tadpole, and you would have basically stripped Americans of their right to be secure in their Fourth Amendment rights against eminent domain and the unlawful taking of property in the Fifth Amendment, based on the fact that the administrative agency, which happens to be the Environmental Protection Agency, including the North American Wetlands Conservation Act. So you can throw out to me, ma'am, all of the goodies that you threw into this bag, but what you failed to recognize was the treason associated with the remainder of it. That's my bullet points. That's as far as I'm going to go. We're going to hit on this Administrative Procedures Act because I have to tell you, this is some heavy stuff and there's a lot to it. If you don't have a pen and paper today, that is on you, and it is your failure to be prepared because we are going to cover an enormous amount of ground. And I strongly encourage you to make sure that you are properly prepared for the remainder of the last couple of days of this review, because we're going to cover the Administrative Procedures Act and the tyranny that's associated with administrative law. What you don't realize, and by the way, if you're watching this streaming, you'll notice this jacket behind me that has emblazoned across the back, Tyranny Response Team. That's the TRT, or what we call the Tyranny Response Team. It is a private organization that is based and designed to stop tyranny in its tracks. Governmental tyranny, administrative agency tyranny, legislative tyranny, executive tyranny, judicial tyranny. And that is what we fight for every single day. America's Voice Now is based upon and has only one function, and that is to awaken and alert America to the tyranny living in our midst. Parading around, by the way, is law. Okay, let's talk about the APA and the Administrative Procedures Act and who some of these players are. For those of you who don't know, there are well over 500 administrative agencies. And these agencies run the gamut of, I have in my hand and you can't see it because I'm on radio, but I have in my hand a list of over 500 of them. And they run from the gamut from AmeriCorps Recruiting, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Trade Bureau, which is underneath the Treasury, to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the National Archives, the bankruptcy courts, the botanical gardens, literally hundreds and hundreds of bureaus and organizations and committees. And I mean, they're so numerous and there's so many of them, I couldn't even possibly begin to read them all. What you don't realize is that the administrative procedures that these agencies operate under is codified in something called the Administrative Procedure Act. And this is Title V, if you're interested. This is Title V of the federal law. And the APA, or the Administrative Procedures Act, was originally created because administrative procedures were originally a function of, and they were designed by, and let's understand the history of this. Back in 1946, the United States federal government passed the law which governs the way that these administrative agencies can operate. These agencies came into play because Roosevelt, back in the Depression days, passed all of these acts allowing or bringing these agencies into existence. And these agencies covered a gamut of different organizations and issues surrounding industries and so forth. And so basically the APA is the way that it's a Bill of Rights, if you will, right, for the literally hundreds of millions of Americans whose affairs are basically controlled and modified by the administrative procedures process. Now, what you need to understand is that our federal agencies and the total number of agencies out there actually dwarf Congress. You were under the impression, mistakenly, that Congress passed all the laws. And what I'm here to tell you is that that is not the truth. What does this show stand on? We tell you the truth that the mainstream media neglects to tell you every single day. And this is the truth, that agencies, administrative agencies, actually dwarf the Congress when it comes to implementing regulations that parade as law. And they control the lives, the industries, the business of literally every single American, whether you're an infant or you're a senior who is literally living on borrowed time. Congress has delegated all or most of its lawmaking ability over to these administrative agencies. And there is no expression anywhere in the Constitution for that kind of tyranny. In other words, Congress has delegated, without authority, all of their rulemaking and lawmaking authority to these unelected bureaucrats. And we're going to address how and why and what these agencies do, and then what we can do to fight back against them. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. We will not be taking calls this morning until the very last few minutes of the show. And then we'll limit those calls to just a quick sentence, and we're going to move on. I don't want long diatribes. I've got a lot of information to cover. If you don't have a pen and paper handy today, I strongly encourage you during this commercial break to go get one. You're listening to America's Voice. We'll be right back.
The The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, your Class 3 dealer for automatic weapons and suppressors, including Gemtech and Huntertown, with a great selection of holsters, slings, magazines, and gun storage options. West Plains Pawn and Jewelry will also do special orders. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West U.S. Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
Pacific Beach Tanning and Fitness is ready to help you look and feel your best in 2013. Start with UV therapy. There's nothing like a deep warmth of a tanning bed to ease muscle and joint pain and eliminate the winter blues. Next, step into our fully equipped gym and get in a great workout. Finally, reward yourself with a session on the PowerWave massage bed. Do something great for yourself and take a trip to the beach. Pacific Beach Tanning and Fitness, 110 West Trish Knight Street, downtown West Plains.
Okay, I'd like you to, today is Tuesday, and so I would like you to take advantage of two friends that we have here today. Chantilly's Artisan Bakery offers an outstanding lunch that they offer from about 11 o'clock onward, and it's unique and different every day, and I strongly encourage you to get over to Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, number 2, Evans Arcade, right off the square in West Plains. You can call her to find out what today's unusual lunch special will be. Her telephone number is 255-2253. And if you are about town, you can stop in at our friends over at Pizza Hut. They have a lunch special that is a kind of a buffet style, and there's a salad bar there, and there's pizza there, and there's pasta and things like that. So make sure that you either visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard, or you go to Chantilly's Artisan Bakery. You can get a hold of Chantilly's at 255-2253. Pizza Hut also has tonight family night. So if you have children under the age of 12, they eat free. I strongly encourage you to make sure that you participate with our vendors. These are the folks that support you every day. Okay, let's understand something. That the administrative agencies out there in the nation are making literally millions of laws that affect and prescribe the way in which you can live your life, that affect and create rules that prescribe basically the conduct of private citizens, industry, businesses, state, and local governments as well. Now realize that there are a couple of different types of administrative agencies, and they fall underneath the 3 branches of government. There are executive agencies. Now an executive agency, as an example, would be the Census Bureau. They're part of the Commerce Department, which is also an executive agency. And there are, underneath that, these agencies are, many of them are actually completely independent. So there are some that actually don't fall up underneath other or any of the 3 specific branches, which means, by the way, that ought to tell you something right off the bat. If there's an administrative agency that doesn't fall underneath the executive, the judicial, or the legislative, then what does that tell you? That's an extra constitutional organization. In other words, it's outside of Congress, and it's therefore outside of our Constitution. There are only 3 branches of government enumerated in the Constitution. And yet if you've created a 4th branch of government, the administrative agency, it is, for all intents and purposes, extra constitutional. Now, a good example of that would be the Food and Drug Administration. It is not underneath either the executive or the judicial or the legislative. And therefore, it is accountable to no one. It's not accountable to the president, and it's not accountable to Congress. It manufactures rules, regulations that become law, and it operates exclusively based upon its own authority. Ladies and gentlemen, that should tell you everything that you need to know. The FDA, as an example, can issue regulations that have the same force and effect as any statute or law passed. They can impose penalties for violation, and they can even conduct trial-like proceedings that will affect the rights and the interests of the particular parties that we're talking about. Now, let's understand what that means. This means that an independent agency, which is an administrative agency, has no responsibility to or accountability to either Congress or the president, has the ability to hold trial-like. And I want you to remember those words, trial-like, because they become extremely important. Remember that they actually act like the court in many instances. They hold their own hearings, and they hold their own system of judicial ruling. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a terrifying prospect, because there is a principle called the separation of powers. And it's a foundational cornerstone of our Constitution. What that means is that the separation of powers is clearly delineated so that each of the three branches of government act as a check and a balance against the others. Administrative agencies have no checks and they have no balances. The problems that come from this are so blatant and obvious to everyone who wants to take a look that I'll give you a perfect example. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency is an agency that, for all intents and purposes, passes, after a rulemaking period, what they call a regulation. And what they're doing right now, are you familiar with cap and trade? If you're not, you should be. Cap and trade is basically a policy by the government that says that they can charge you a tax for your carbon footprint. Now, your carbon footprint would be how much fuel you use, how much gasoline you use, how much heat you use in your home, how much food you eat. A carbon footprint is how much carbon you consume in your lifetime. And cap and trade says that they can put a cap on how much carbon every individual is allowed to create a footprint with, and then tax you for any carbon use above that. Now, they tried to get this through in Congress in legislation they tried to pass back in 2009 and 2011. Both houses of Congress rejected it. Both. The Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate and in the House all denied cap and trade. They refused to pass it. What you don't know is that the EPA is actually passing it anyway. They are passing cap and trade. They are attempting to produce legislation through regulation. Now, how can that be, you ask? Well, I'm going to give you an example. If you recall, back about 4 or 5 months ago, the EPA came out and declared that carbon dioxide was a pollutant. Now, wait a second. How can that be? I mean, as I'm speaking right now, I'm exhaling carbon dioxide. That's right. Carbon dioxide is also necessary for plant life. Plants take in carbon dioxide and expel oxygen. They inhale carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. I inhale oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. So do you. What you have to realize is that by the EPA declaring that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, it allows them to set the framework and the balance and the foundation for carbon tax or carbon cap and trade. Now, that means that everything that you do, everything that you touch, everything that you act upon, your telephone, your cell phone, your computer, the car you drive, the work that you do at your place of business, everything is involved in some way in energy use. And when you have the overarching ability to control energy use, you can pick and choose winners in industry and in business, and you can subjugate the individual by saying, you've exceeded your carbon credits for the month. Now, the fact is that they're doing this, the EPA is doing this, through the regulatory powers or regulation power that they claim under the Administrative Agency or Administrative Procedures Act as an administrative agency. So, since Congress was unable to pass the law properly, the EPA has determined that they're going to pass it irrespective of what Congress does. Now, that's resulted in a couple of things. One, the EPA has been hammered with a bunch of lawsuits, which basically does what? It clogs up the court system. And in addition to that, because of the fact that these lawsuits are against the EPA and therefore against the federal government, there is an enormous amount of inability for industry and businesses to move in any direction, because they don't know whether or not, depending upon whether the court case is won or lost, which might take years, by the way, they don't know whether they're going to be affected by it. This is extra constitutional. So basically what we have, and of course the end result is that taking it to court means that judges who are judicially active can ultimately allow the EPA to continue in their tirade of tyranny against America. Now, here's a perfect example. There's a case in point here. There was a case by a person called Reynolds, and they were the founder of the Pain Relief Network. Now, this is a network of people that advocated for adequate pain medication for patients, which was against the regulations and the recommendations of agencies like the FDA and the DEA. Basically, what they say is it's up to a doctor to determine how much pain medication an individual should get. And the FDA and the DEA came out and said, oh, no, it's not. We have the opportunity and the right to limit that and to furthermore investigate and or prosecute any doctor who we feel has exceeded his ability to or exceeded his limit of dispensing pain medication. Now, there was a U.S. attorney by the name of Treadway who attempted to silence the litigant here, Reynolds, with a gag order. Can you imagine? You're in a court case, and the AUSA, which is an assistant U.S. attorney, comes out and says, Your Honor, we're asking for a gag order on the plaintiff in this case because we don't want that plaintiff to be able to speak to the press about this case. You've got to be kidding me. Is that not a violation of your First Amendment right? The gag order, by the way, was denied by the court. The gag order was denied by the court, and properly so. But what you have to understand is that by now, through financial attrition, that the federal government has essentially bankrupted the Pain Relief Network. They've completely bankrupted them. They're out of business at this point. And most of the trial filings have been sealed by the court. What that means is that you can't go in and review the briefs that were submitted by either party. You can't review the decisions made by the judge. You can't review the testimony given by the witnesses. This, of course, from the most transparent administration in history, right? When you seal a court case, even the amicus briefs. Now, an amicus brief is a brief that is submitted to the court by an independent party who, for all intents and purposes, does not have an axe to grind in the case. And they're not for the plaintiff or for the defendant. They are an interested party in the sense that they are interested in either justice, or maybe they're interested from the perspective of legislative issues. And a couple of examples is like the Cato Institute and the Reason Foundation and the Institute for Justice. All of their amicus briefs have been sealed. Ladies and gentlemen, that is unheard of. We're going to have to take a break. It's the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we'll continue on this issue of administrative agencies and the Administrative Procedures Act and the tyranny that they are raining down upon America. We'll be right back.
News Radio. I'm Chris Foster. He thought his girlfriend was a burglar, and that's why he shot her. That's what the South African track star Oscar Pistorius claims in court in an affidavit.
The prosecution says that it was premeditated murder because actually Pistorius would have had to attach his prosthetic legs before walking 7 yards to the bathroom where his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp, was holed up, locked in, cowering after an argument in the wee hours of Valentine's Day.
Fox's Amy Kellogg. Parents of a pregnant 16-year-old girl in Texas agree she can have the baby.
The teen alleges in court records her parents threatened her with physical force if she didn't abort the child. But the young mother and her parents settled their differences. She was represented by the anti-abortion group, the Texas Center for Defense of Life.
Isaiah Carey with Fox 26 in Houston. The girl and her boyfriend say they want to get married. Fox News, we report, you decide.
Family Fun and Fitness, LLC presents rape and assault prevention classes at Country Cupboard in Licking, Missouri. Men, women, boys, and girls, if you want to know how to stack the deck in your favor in a situation where violence is the only answer, this class is for you. Rape and assault prevention classes are held Monday evenings at 5:30 beginning February 11th and run through March 18th. Class size is limited, so call today 417-260-1006 or register at Country Cupboard, 217 North Highway 63 in Licking.
I know what you're thinking, Bunk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5?
Dirty Harry gets all his ammo from the battery station. John Rambo, you guessed it. He gets his ammo from the battery station, too. So if you need ammo, go to the place where the guys who know about ammunition go, the battery station. They have one of the largest supplies of ammunition in the area. So make sure you're stocked up and don't get low on shells. Go to the battery station at 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains.
The deals at U.S. Cellular's Unbelievable Sales event are so incredible, even guys who believe in aliens can't believe them.
Open your eyes, sheeple. They are among us.
But a free Motorola Electrify M when you buy one for $149.99?
Conspiracy theory.
U.S. Cellular's Unbelievable Sales event. Now through April 1st. U.S. Cellular. Hello, better. Certain restrictions apply. Applicable smartphone data plans required. New 2-year agreements and $30 activation fees may apply. See store for details.
There's one man on this earth who really, truly gets it.
Barack Obama is destroying the economy. He's destroying our school system by nationalizing the student loan program. He's destroying the industrial heartland of this nation by doing exactly what he said he would do. Driving up the cost of electricity, driving up the cost of doing business, putting hard-working men and women out of jobs.
Mark Levin.
Weeknights from 5 till 8, Mark Levin on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1.
Weather is a service of News Talk 107.1 The Point. Contact Josh or Cody at 255-2548 for more information on making weather sponsorships part of your marketing plans.
From the Point Weather Center, for this morning, a clear sky to be sunny through the day, high 46. Mainly clear tonight, low 20. Times of clouds and sunshine tomorrow, high 36. Deep and freezing rain to start the day Thursday, mixing with and changing to rain in the afternoon, high 36. I'm meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
It's a free-for-all on the next Alan Colmes Show. Every call I get goes on the air totally on screen, so you'll never know what to expect. Call and join the madness. Plus, can teaching kids flagrant lies be considered abuse? That's what one prominent physicist says regarding teaching children creationism. He'll be here to explain it on the next Alan Colmes Show.
Weekdays 9 to midnight. It's the Alan Colmes Show on the Ozarks Best News Talk 107.1 The Point.
All right, we're back. Listen, I'd like you to make note of two things. One, our friends over at Stone Construction. You can call Bill Stone if you're doing any kind of work, whether it's a remodel, new construction, repair, whether it's home construction, farm work, or some light commercial work, or even heavy commercial work. Get a hold of Bill Stone at Stone Construction at 2930116. This is what he specializes in. Been doing this for a long, long time. Get a hold of Stone Construction and allow them to bid on your next project at 2930116. Also, I don't want to forget our friend Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. He sponsors our phone lines, which are not working today because I'm not letting them work. And Wits End Classic Barbershop, excellent opportunity for you to take your husband or your man or even your kids in and have a great haircut done for $10. treat your man to a special hot lather shave with a straight razor, and it's a wonderful opportunity for you to give him a special treat. If you didn't do something like that for Valentine's Day, go on in there. He's right on the square in West Plains. It's called Wits End Classic Barbershop. And make sure that you visit and patronize our sponsors. They're the ones who keep the show on for you. Okay, let's understand something about administrative law and the way that these agencies operate. Because they have all three powers basically delegated to them, which means that they have the legislative, that's the ability to make law. They have the executive, because they're under the executive branch, many of them. And because they have the judicial aspect of their ability to create and hear cases and complaints against them. So you're asking the fox to guard the hen house. If you have a complaint against an administrative agency, the first thing that you do is you go back to an administrative agency for a trial-like hearing. And remember, I asked you earlier on to remember the word trial-like, because they use it. Now, there is no substitute for a true judicial trial. There is no substitute for having a court hear what an administrative agency has done to abuse you and your rights. But they hold a trial-like hearing with witnesses and the whole. It's a faux court, F-A-U-X, a faux court. Let me clarify it for you by reading you a quote from a gentleman that you'll recognize. He wrote this in a book called Notes on Virginia. All the powers of government, legislative, executive, and judiciary, result in a legislative body. The concentrating of these powers in the same hands is precisely the definition of despotic government. It will be no alleviation that these powers will be exercised by a plurality of hands and not by a single one. 173 despots would surely be as oppressive as one. As little will it avail that they are chosen by ourselves. An elective despotism was not the government we fought for. Thomas Jefferson. Now, if that's not enough to convince you that administrative agencies, which own the power of government, all-inclusive, which is legislative, executive, and judiciary, that result in one organization, then I encourage you to hear what James Madison had to say in the Federalist, number 47. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. James Madison, Federalist, number 47. Both of these gentlemen are clearly indicating that you can have an elective despotism, an elective despot. In other words, we elected, and if you want proof of that, I'll give you a perfect and current example, or relatively current. Recent history. The nation of Austria voted. They were not taken over by Hitler. They voted to put Hitler in power. 92%. Did you hear what I just said? 92% of Austria voted to put Hitler into power. So an elective despotism is no different than one commandeered by an individual or a group of individuals. And we see here where James Madison says it makes no difference whether it's in the same hands of one, a few, or many, and whether it's hereditary, self-appointed, and I want you to remember that term self-appointed, because most administrative agencies are exactly that. They are self-appointed final arbiters of the law. Or elective. These may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. What we have to recognize is that even when it's in the hands of those that have been elected or self-elected, it always produces despotism and tyranny. Always. So it's important to recognize. In fact, I'm going to go you one step further. George Washington, in his farewell address, made another quote, and I'm going to read it to you because it's critically important to you, understanding how administrative agencies have vastly usurped the authority that may have originally been given to them, but have now gotten so out of control that there's nothing that can bring them back within the realm of, or rein the wild stallion in, shall we say. George Washington, 1796, farewell address. It is important, likewise, that the habits of thinking in a free country should inspire caution in those entrusted with its administration, to confine themselves within their respective constitutional spheres, avoiding the exercise of the power of one department to encroach upon another. The spirit of encroachment tends to consolidate the power of all departments in one, and thus to create whatever the form of government, a real despotism. So what we have to recognize is that administrative agencies, and I'll pick a few off the top of the list, the IRS. The IRS is an administrative agency. There is no place in the Constitution where it's been declared that it can exist. It was created by the Treasury to collect money. It's an administrative agency, nothing more, nothing less. The FCC, Federal Communications Commission. Now, the FCC regulates this particular form of media right here, and television as well, anything broadcast. The Federal Communications Commission is an administrative agency, and they pass rulemakings all the time. They give the public like 90 days to comment on it, and then they do as they choose. And then everyone has to live underneath the regulation and the rules that they have created. A few other examples. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health. USDA, the EEOC, the EPA, and the Federal Trade Commission. Let me explain to you this way. These agencies have executive power, and it's completely extra-constitutional. They have no authority to have this power from a constitutional perspective, and quite frankly, Congress was not given the power to create them. So while they may declare that they're lawful because they were delegated by Congress with the authority to act, Congress didn't have that delegated authority from the Constitution in the first place. Just because Congress has instituted them does not mean that they have that authority. Congress can no more act extra-constitutionally than can the president, than can the judiciary, than can you. No one, no entity, no organization, no governmental entity has the right to exercise extra-constitutional power. And yet Congress has in some cases delegated authority. In some cases, these agencies have been created by executive order. In some cases, by judicial ruling. And in some cases, by the legislative through Congress. However, one thing is common. These agencies all have executive power. In many cases, actually, they've each taken executive power to the extent where they have their own law enforcement organizations. How can that be, you say? Well, how many of these organizations, including the Department of Homeland Security, have paramilitary SWAT teams? Did you know that the Postal Service has a SWAT team? Did you know that the Forest Service has a SWAT team? Did you know that the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has a SWAT team? Is that for what? The protection of lying, to protect lying weather forecasters from the upset public who would charge the station? I mean, I don't get it. Explain it to me, if you can. You can't. I'm not even going to bother to take your call. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about how these organizations actually violate your rights and privileges and your liberties every single day. You're listening to America's Voice. Please stick with us for the remainder of today's show. We are doing a series on administrative agencies and the tyranny which they rain down upon America every single day.
The area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry.
Online at westplainspawn.com.
Top of the line new and used optics from Nikon, Leopold, Burris, Redfield, Zeiss, and Schmidt & Bender. Ask about their selection of binoculars, laser sights, and night vision goggles. With new arrivals every week, the area's best selection of firearms, ammunition, and accessories can only be found at West Plains Pawn and Jewelry, 1713 West US Highway 160, or shop online at westplainspawn.com.
The New York Times recently did a story on preppers. The story concluded that prepping was very rational behavior. Preppers are doctors, lawyers, teachers, builders, and plumbers, people just like you. At Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, we specialize in the products and knowledge to provide your own safety net for troubled times. Isn't it time you joined your Ozarks neighbors who are already working toward independence? That's Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, 3225 Highway 62 East in Mountain Home, 870-492-4030.
Everybody knows Crossroads Convenience has the coldest beer in town, but did you also know they have U-Haul rentals available 7 days a week? The best hot beverage selection of coffee and cappuccinos to help keep your body warm during these colder Ozark days and nights. That's Crossroads Convenience in West Plains.
You're watching your favorite TV show, and something important is about to happen. Your phone rings. What do? You can't pay attention to both. The same thing happens when you talk on the phone while driving. You stop noticing things like slowing cars or a light turning red. No call or text is worth a life. Remember, when you're on the road, stay off the phone. Learn more at nsc.org, a public service from the National Safety Council.
If you missed America's Voice Now at 8 a.m. this morning, catch a repeat of America's Voice Now with your host, Michael Evans, at 8 p.m. every night, Monday through Friday, right here on 107.1, the Ozarks' best news talk radio network. Get in to see our friends over at West Plains Pawn and Gun. You can find them on the web at westplainspawn.com. You can also call them at 417-256-3000. 500 guns in stock, accessories, ammunition, magazines, optics, pretty much anything that you'd want to know about or have in the firearms realm. They're there to assist you. They're about 1.5 miles past Walmart on the Highway 160 on the right-hand side. Also, our friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance, they're a half mile east of Walmart on Highway 62 in Mountain Home. You can reach them by finding them on the web at ozarkmtnselfreliance.com, and you can call them at 870-492-4030. You can also reach our friends at the Battery Station, 303 Washington Avenue in West Plains. You can find them on the web at batterystation.com. You can also call them at 417-257-7799. Make sure you support our sponsors. They're supporting you. Okay. I want to, and I'm going to take a couple of minutes of phone calls in the last 5 minutes, but before we get there, I want you to understand the implications of this before we wrap this particular show today. What you have to understand is that in 1950, the Supreme Court made a ruling, and that Supreme Court ruling was in a case called United States versus Morton Salt. Now, we all know who Morton Salt is. That's the salt that sits on your table every day, right? The Supreme Court ruled that administrative agencies have what they called, and this is their quote, not mine, powers of inquisition. You heard me right. The Supreme Court ruled that that administrative agencies have powers of inquisition. And here's how they define those powers of inquisition. And this is their quote, folks, not mine. This means that these agencies can do the following: investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not. That's their quote. Powers of inquisition are defined by the Supreme Court in 1950 in the United States versus Morton Salt in the following quote: agencies can investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not being violated. Let me put this into perspective for you. Here's what the Fourth Amendment says. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, I want you to compare those two statements. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Compare power of inquisition, United States versus Morton Salt, 1950, Supreme Court ruling, defining power of inquisition. Agencies can investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not. Wow. Wow. You see, how are they justifying that? Because the power of inquisition and investigation on suspicion is clearly a blatant violation of the Fourth Amendment. I mean, it's so obvious that a Martian landing here, taught English for a week, could read that and say, we have a major problem here. Well, let me tell you how they do it. This abuse is done through language. It's allowed because of language. That's impossible, you say. No, it isn't. Let me clarify for you how they've done it. They don't call it a power of inquisition, and they don't call it an investigation. They call it a administrative action. Now, we all go under the basic premise that if it walks like a duck, if it smells like a duck, if it's got wings that flap like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Not so the federal government. Not so administrative agencies. Not so our Congress. They say, well, we call it an administrative action, and so therefore it is not a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Because it's not a criminal investigation. It's merely an administrative action. Now, the Fourth Amendment doesn't specifically bar administrative action. But let's remember the real premise of the Fourth Amendment. The real premise of the Fourth Amendment is like every of the other amendments, and the Constitution in its entirety, and the Declaration of Independence. The purpose of that is to bind men down with chains of the Constitution, because we cannot trust the goodwill of those in power. Remember that statement, to bind men down with the chains of the Constitution. Therefore, they have enumerated powers which are limited in their scope. Enumerated power says that there are a very clear and distinct bullet list of powers that the federal government may exercise. And they are enumerated and delineated in the Constitution. It's very, very clear what they are. And yet our federal government has usurped authority, stolen power, and has declared administrative agencies to have the executive power of inquisition, in which they may investigate merely on suspicion that a law is being violated, or even just because they want assurance that it is not. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the definition of tyranny. That is the definition of treason. Congress has no authority to delegate that kind of authority to anyone. In fact, they don't have that authority themselves. How can they possibly delegate an authority which they do not hold? I can delegate authority for my personal finances to someone else in my absence. I can sign something called a power of attorney that will allow you, the listener, to go in and operate on my behalf for a period of time, usually very clearly delineated in the power of attorney. It's called a limited power of attorney. And I give you a limited power of attorney because I'm going to be out of the country, and the car that I ordered is going to be delivered. And someone has to sign for it. And someone has to write a check. And someone has to take delivery of that vehicle. And so I give you a limited power of authority to go in and operate on my behalf, to write a check for the exact amount, and only the exact amount, of the purchase of that vehicle. That you may go out and apply for insurance, and that you may obtain the necessary permits for me to take that vehicle and leave the parking lot with it, or for you to take it on my behalf. And I clearly state in there that you have a limited power of attorney that is operable only for this particular transaction. What it means is that you can't then go write yourself a check out of my bank account and take your girlfriend on a trip to Bermuda. It means that you cannot go and take money from my account and go to Las Vegas and put yourself at the gaming tables with my money. It means that you are not entitled to sell any of my possessions. It's a limited power of authority. And our Constitution is identical. It's a limited power of attorney. We, the American populace, have given our constitutional have given our constitutional authority and delegated a very small, minute part of it to our government to be used only for a very clear and specific reason, and that reason must be in our best interest. You would never give someone power of authority to work against your best interest. That would defy logic. And yet, our government has taken that limited power of authority, power of attorney, if you will, and they have said, well, we have access to Mike's bank account, and we have access to his checkbook, and we have access to his signature. And so we're going to give my sister a credit card with an unlimited balance and tally on it, and we're going to go out and go gambling, and I'm going to give my brother access to his bank account so that he can go on vacation and buy himself a car and a Rolex watch. Is that what I intended? I think not. Tomorrow, we are going to address the additional aspects or areas in which constitutional authority has been stolen from you and me. We're also going to talk about a couple of issues surrounding what we can do to bring administrative agencies to heel. Go ahead, caller. You've got 1 second.
Yeah, administrative justice is kangaroo justice.
Absolutely. Thank you. Folks, we're gonna disappear for the day. We'll be back tomorrow morning bright and early. Do not miss the remainder of this program.
News Talk for Missouri and Arkansas. 107.1 KBMV, Birch Tree, West Plains. The Point.